In the quiet hours before dawn, when the galaxy lies hushed beneath a blanket of shimmering stars, an ancient melody awakens, a gentle lullaby of the cosmos sung by the Jedi Code itself. This is the living force, tender and vibrant, interwoven with the vast, timeless current of the cosmic force, carrying the wisdom of all existence. Tonight, that call echoes in the heart of a young initiate whose destiny is about to unfold like the petals of a midnight blossom. Within the cool stone corridors of a venerable Jedi temple, where echoes of past masters linger like soft whispers, the initiate meditates in profound silence. The air, redolent with incense, and the subtle vibration of ancient chants, forms a harmonious blend of memory and mystery. Every carved pillar and worn step bears witness to the sacred balance once revered by those who came before. In this hallowed quiet, the Force speaks with a tender yet profound voice, reciting the very poetry of creation. A vision begins to bloom, a luminous tapestry woven from threads of light and shadow. The initiate sees before them a cosmic vista, an endless expanse where nebulae swirl like delicate watercolors and stars pulse in gentle rhythms. In this vision, the living force appears as a soft, nurturing glow that embraces all life, while the cosmic force stretches infinitely, carrying the legacy of time. It is a wordless hymn to the eternal cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. At the heart of this vision stand the Mortis gods, the Father, the Son, and the Daughter, avatars of balance, whose very presence embodies the unity of opposites. The Father, stern and ancient, represents order and the strength of tradition, his deep voice anchoring the cosmos. The Son, wild and turbulent, embodies chaos and passion, a reminder that conflict can spark creation. The Daughter, luminous and compassionate, bridges these extremes with empathy and grace. Together they sing a timeless song of balance, inviting all who seek unity with the Force to cast aside mortal fears and embrace the eternal dance of life. As the vision deepens, the initiate feels the cosmic force swell within, a subtle invitation to merge, to become one with this universal rhythm. The Jedi Code, once learned as cold doctrine, transforms into a living lullaby. Every syllable now pulses with the promise of immortality, not as a means to escape death, but as a return to the infinite flow of existence. In that moment, the initiate understands that becoming one with the Force means dissolving the boundaries of self and surrendering to the perpetual rhythm of life. Outside the sanctuary, the gentle hum of the galaxy serves as a constant reminder of interconnectedness. The initiate envisions the Force as a vast river, its waters both calm and raging, its currents ever-changing, yet unwavering. In the silent intervals between thought and breath, echoes of ancient masters urge the seeker to trust the mystery and embrace the underlying balance of creation. A deep serenity settles as the vision recedes, leaving behind a lingering sense of wonder and purpose. The Mortis gods, ever vigilant, impart a glimpse of true immortality, a state of oneness with the Force that transcends the cycle of life and death. This revelation is not a promise of endless life in the conventional sense, but an invitation to become part of the cosmic tapestry, to join the eternal chorus of existence. As the first hints of dawn edge the horizon in soft hues of violet and gold, the initiate opens their eyes, transformed. The Jedi Code now resounds like a sacred lullaby, a gentle reminder that immortality is found not by clinging to life, but by surrendering to the infinite. Every heartbeat echoes the rhythm of the Force. Every breath draws them deeper into eternal mystery. Rising with quiet determination, the initiate steps forward, ready to walk the path of oneness with the Force. The song of the cosmic force, ancient and ever new, continues to guide them, a call to embrace the balance of the universe and discover immortality in its endless flow. As the cosmic song of balance continued to echo through the vastness of the Force, a new murmur rose from the depths of memory, a whisper carried on the breath of ancient spirits. In the dim corridors of time, where legends intertwine with destiny, emerged the figure of Qui-Gon Jinn, a master whose presence bridged the realms of life and death. His story was not one of mortal feats, but a quiet revelation, a first whisper of a secret that would shape the destiny of Jedi immortality. Long before the young initiate learned to merge with the cosmic flow, tales of Qui-Gon Jinn drifted through the temple halls like gentle winds. He was known not only as a warrior of light, but as a seeker of truths hidden beyond the veil of the living. In his quest, Qui-Gon discovered the elusive Force ghosts through the ancient wisdom of the Whills, a celestial chorus that wove the tapestry of the Force with voices older than the stars. Their hymns, softly resonating in the silent gaps between thought and breath, spoke of a unity that defied the boundaries of life and death. In quiet moments of meditation beneath the shadowed arches of old temples, the initiate would hear murmurs of that legendary discovery. It was said that during a long solitary vigil at the wellspring of life, Qui-Gon had glimpsed the spirits of fallen masters, not as mere apparitions of the past, but as living echoes, guiding lights that illuminated the path to eternal oneness with the Force. These ethereal presences, interwoven with the Whills' eternal hymn, revealed that mortality could be transcended through unity, a truth accessible only by those willing to truly listen. Qui-Gon's journey was marked by a profound connection with the Force, a relationship that transcended the rigid dictates of dogma. He embraced impermanence, understanding that life flowed continuously and that death was merely a gentle shift in that endless current. In his eyes shone a spark of curiosity and compassion, allowing him to perceive beyond the physical realm into a dimension where every soul and every memory was interlinked. His quiet defiance of conventional teachings earned him reverence among those who believed that immortality lay in surrendering to the Force rather than in its conquest. The initiate recalled stories of Qui-Gon's encounters with the priestesses of the Force, enigmatic seers who guarded the wellspring of life. In secluded sanctuaries, hidden from the prying eyes of the Republic, these priestesses underwent trials that tested their resolve against the torrents of destiny. It was during these sacred rites that Qui-Gon learned the art of listening, not to command the Force, but to be guided by its soft, persistent pulse. Their trials, filled with both ecstatic insight and quiet agony, revealed that true mastery lay in embracing impermanence and surrendering the ego to the greater flow of life. Every lesson Qui-Gon gathered became a note in the grand symphony of the Force, a melody that would echo down through generations of Jedi. His experiences served as a bridge, linking the realm of the living to that of the Force ghosts. The whispers of the Whills taught that destiny is fulfilled when one learns to let go, when the transient nature of flesh is transcended by a spirit interwoven with the cosmic whole. As the memory of Qui-Gon's discovery rippled through the initiate's consciousness, the ancient voices of the Whills seemed to murmur in unison with the soft chant of the temple's stone. Every being was revealed as a thread in the vast tapestry of the Force, a tapestry where the living and the spectral danced in harmonious balance. With a heart still tender from that first awakening, the initiate resolved to follow this whispered legacy. They understood that the secret of immortality lay not in defying death, but in accepting it as part of an endless cycle, a cycle of creation, dissolution, and rebirth. Under a sky slowly brightening with the promise of dawn, the initiate rose, carrying the gentle wisdom of Qui-Gon Jinn's discovery. The memory of the Force ghosts and the eternal hymn of the Whills served as a luminous guide, a beacon in the dark corridors of existence. With quiet determination, they stepped forward into the vast unknown, ready to learn, to listen, and to become one with the eternal song of the Force. In the gentle light of a new day, the echoes of Qui-Gon Jinn's revelations softened into a deeper, ancient murmur, a song carried on the very breath of the cosmos. The initiate, having tasted the delicate wisdom of Force ghosts and the soft cadence of the Whills' hymn, turned inward once more to listen to the voices of time. It was said that the Journal of the Whills held within its pages the cosmic tapestry of the Force, a living record of every moment, every emotion, every flicker of light and shadow that ever graced the galaxy. Within the quiet sanctuary of the temple's inner archives, among scrolls and hollow records inscribed with secrets of forgotten eras, the initiate discovered a secluded alcove. Dust danced in early sunlight that filtered through ancient windows, and in the profound silence the soft pulse of the Force could almost be heard. Here, the initiate opened a weathered manuscript, a record of the Whills, whose hymns had bound the Jedi to the eternal cycle of life and death. As the initiate's fingers traced the faded symbols on the parchment, they almost heard the gentle voices of the Whills, a chorus singing of destinies interwoven with the cosmos. Every word resonated with the truth that the Force was not a static power to be controlled, but a dynamic, living energy flowing through every star, every planet, every living soul. In that moment, the initiate understood that the Whills were not mere keepers of memory, but the storytellers of the galaxy, weaving every soul into an endless, harmonious symphony. The manuscript spoke of celestial bodies, ancient legends, and Jedi masters who had trodden the narrow path between life and death. It was a tapestry where past and future merged, a record of fluid, evolving truth rather than rigid doctrine. The ancient text seemed to whisper secrets of battles fought not with sabers, but with hearts, and moments of surrender that transformed fleeting mortality into everlasting light. After reading, the initiate closed the manuscript and let the gentle hum of the Whills' hymn fill the quiet chamber. Outside, the world stirred with the promise of a new day. Yet here, in this hushed solitude, the weight of every recorded memory pressed gently upon the initiate. It was as if the voices of ancient Jedi and long-forgotten souls, preserved by the Whills, gathered in silent communion. The initiate recalled how the Whills' hymns had shaped the very essence of Jedi teachings. In legends passed quietly from master to Padawan, the Whills were revered as active participants in the eternal dance of the Force. Their songs bound the Jedi to the cosmic flow, reminding them that every triumph and every sorrow was but a note in the grand symphony of existence. The initiate realized that the pursuit of immortality was not about clinging to life or defying death. It was about merging with the eternal flow and joining the everlasting song. Visions stirred in the initiate's mind as the manuscript's ancient lines conjured images of luminous figures, Jedi of old, walking serene paths under starlight, their lives intertwined with the galaxy's rhythm. Each memory was like a star in the vast firmament of the Force, each note of the eternal hymn a reminder that nothing truly perishes. It only transforms. With the manuscript carefully tucked away, the initiate rose with renewed determination. They understood that the true power of the Whills lay in transforming memory into guidance, a reminder that the path to oneness with the Force is paved with stories of triumph and loss, joy and sorrow. Every whispered hymn was an invitation to let go of mortal fears and surrender to the eternal current. Stepping out into the awakening world, the initiate carried the gentle chorus of the Whills in their heart, a soft, unending reminder that every soul is bound by the eternal song of the Force. In the silence that followed the Whills' hymn, the initiate's thoughts turned to one whose journey into the mysteries of the Force had once walked the razor's edge between light and darkness. Master Yoda, revered for his wisdom and age, had not always been the unshakable presence the Order remembered. Even he, whose life had spanned centuries, had faced the trembling uncertainty of shadow. It was during the last days of the Clone Wars, in a time when war clouded even the most luminous minds, that Yoda began to hear whispers in the Force, echoes not of the galaxy, but of his own soul. He had followed them, not out of pride or curiosity, but out of necessity. Something had shifted, a veil had lifted, and the Force, ever mysterious, had called him to face what lay buried within. On a distant moon in the Dagobah system, ancient, wet, and pulsing with the energy of life, Yoda sat in meditation. Around him, the dense fog of the swamp blurred the line between the real and the imagined. Trees twisted like silent watchers, and the air hung thick with the scent of decay and renewal. It was here, in the shadowed heart of the living Force, that his trial began. From the mist emerged a figure, familiar, twisted, a mirror not of his body, but of his deepest fears, his shadow. This other Yoda bore the same face, the same eyes, but with bitterness curled behind them. Pride, doubt, anger. All the things he had suppressed over the decades now stood before him, breathing as if alive. "Afraid you are," the shadow whispered, its voice like wind through hollow bones. "Alone, weak, failing. Know this, you do." Yoda did not draw his lightsaber. He simply bowed his head. The Force swirled, heavy and ancient, as the two forms, light and shadow, stood in stillness. "To deny me," the shadow sneered, "is to deny yourself." And Yoda knew it to be true. For even the strongest Jedi must face the truth that no being is without fear, without flaws. The light is not purity without darkness. It is peace found in knowing the shadow and choosing to walk beyond it. "I see you," Yoda whispered at last. "Part of me, you are. But rule me, you do not." The shadow screamed, an echo of defiance and pain, and dissolved into the mist, drawn back into the quiet folds of Yoda's spirit. The trial was not to defeat the darkness, but to accept it, to understand it, to integrate it, and then let it pass like a storm across the water. When he opened his eyes, the swamp around him was the same, and yet it breathed differently. The Force pulsed not just around him, but through him. He had shed another veil. His path to the living Force grew clearer, no longer obscured by the illusion of separateness. Unity was not about erasing the shadow. It was about embracing the wholeness of being. The initiate, listening to this tale as if it were a memory of their own, understood. The Whills recorded stories not for glory, but for illumination. And in Yoda's quiet triumph, they found a reflection of their own journey. The Force did not demand perfection. It asked only presence. And presence, the initiate now realized, was forged in the moment one stands with their fear, not in front of it, not behind it, but beside it, acknowledged, accepted, and gently, like a breath, released. In the quiet aftermath of Yoda's trials, as the Force continued its timeless murmur and ancient truths echoed in every silent corner of the temple, a new chapter of destiny began to unfold. Far beyond the secluded sanctuaries of meditation and the spectral lessons of Mortis, a familiar presence emerged from the fabric of legend. It was the memory of a once great master, a guardian whose sacrifice had shaped the very course of the galaxy, a beacon in the darkness of war. Obi-Wan Kenobi. Long ago, on the cold corridors of the Death Star, Obi-Wan had embraced a fate that would transform him from a mortal warrior into a guiding spirit. In that final fateful moment, when the saber in his hand met its mark, he uttered a phrase that would become a paradox for generations. "If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful." This promise of detachment, of transcending physical form, was not a boast of revenge or mere defiance. It was a solemn vow to merge with the living Force and guide future seekers. Now, in the hushed twilight of the temple, the initiate listened to whispered legends of that sacrifice. They learned how Obi-Wan's spirit had not been confined to death's shadow, but had instead emerged as a quiet beacon, a ghost whose presence nurtured hope and illuminated the path toward redemption. His legacy, passed down through subtle echoes in the Force, taught that true immortality lay not in defying death, but in surrendering to the eternal flow. The initiate's thoughts drifted back to that fateful day, imagining the cold metal corridors of the Death Star, bathed in a dim, otherworldly glow. In that crucible of conflict, Obi-Wan had made the ultimate choice, to let go of his mortal self and become one with the cosmic energy that binds all life. His sacrifice was a moment of profound transformation, a passage from the ephemeral to the everlasting. It was a reminder that detachment was not the absence of feeling, but the liberation from the bindings of fear and ego. As the initiate meditated on this ancient truth, the essence of Obi-Wan's sacrifice took on a vivid form. They envisioned a spectral figure moving with graceful serenity through the dark corridors of memory, a presence that did not linger in sorrow, but shone with a gentle, guiding light. In the stillness, the initiate sensed that this ghost was more than a remnant of the past. It was a living, ever-present force that continued to guide those who sought balance and redemption. His whispered counsel echoed in the silence, to face loss with acceptance and to transform pain into a beacon of hope. The lessons of detachment, as taught by the Master of Redemption, resonated deeply. It was a paradox that defied the natural order, a sacrifice that bred life instead of despair. In that quiet moment, the initiate understood that the path to true immortality was not measured by the ability to cling to the physical, but by the capacity to let go, to merge one's spirit with the ever-changing current of the Force. Obi-Wan's ghost was a testament to this eternal truth. a reminder that every end was simply a beginning in disguise. In the soft glow of the rising dawn, the initiate recalled the solemn words of their master Tarek, who had once said, "True power lies not in holding on, but in letting go." With these words echoing in their mind, the initiate felt a stirring, a call to transform, not by resisting death, but by embracing the gentle release that makes the spirit soar free. Each breath drew them closer to the understanding that the legacy of the Jedi was not in the longevity of their mortal coil, but in the continuity of their spirit through the living force. As the day advanced, the initiate rose from their meditation with a quiet determination, carrying within the sacred lesson of Obi-Wan Kenobi. The ghost of redemption had become a part of the eternal song of the Jedi, a melody of hope that sang softly in the background of every new beginning. This revelation would guide them as they continued their journey toward oneness with the Force, a journey marked not by defiance of death, but by the peaceful surrender to the infinite. And so, with the echoes of Obi-Wan's quiet transcendence still resonating in the sacred silence of the temple, the initiate's thoughts turned toward the one who had walked closest to both ruin and redemption. If Obi-Wan was the ghost of gentle guidance, then Anakin Skywalker was the storm that had torn through the galaxy, and in the end, the soul who had healed it. His was a story forged in fire, in love, in betrayal, and finally, in sacrifice. The ancient prophecies spoke of a chosen one who would bring balance to the Force. Many believed Anakin to be that one. Yet, as his shadow stretched long across the stars, he became the very force of imbalance he was destined to destroy. But the Force is patient. The Force waits. And when the time came, Anakin did not disappoint. The initiate imagined that moment clearly. The dark throne room aboard the second Death Star, where the Emperor's lightning danced in cruel arcs, and a father's silence gave way to a final cry of defiance. In lifting the Emperor and casting him down, Anakin Skywalker returned. Not the Sith Lord Darth Vader, not the fallen Jedi, but the man he once was. A father, a protector, a Jedi. In that singular act of self-sacrifice, he fulfilled the prophecy, not through conquest, but through compassion, through love. And yet, the roots of his redemption ran deeper than even that. The ancient texts whispered of Mortis, the realm of living force made manifest. There, long before his fall, Anakin had been tested, tempted by the sun's raw power, and guided by the daughter's luminous spirit. He had been offered dominion over the balance itself, the chance to master both chaos and serenity. But he had turned away, unready. Still, the seed had been planted. Now, the initiate could see clearly. The sun's chaos had always lived within Anakin, fiery and fierce, igniting his passions and fueling his fears. But so too had the daughter's light, quiet, patient, waiting to be remembered. When Anakin cast away the mask, he did not simply destroy Vader. He embraced both parts of himself. He allowed the storm and the stillness to become one. And in that moment, balance was not merely restored, it was reborn. The initiate pondered what it meant to ascend, not as a conqueror, but as one who returns to the light. Anakin's spirit, now free, shimmered in the Force, not as a warning, but as a symbol of hope. His ghost did not linger in anguish. but whispered softly to those willing to hear, "You are never too far gone." Even Yoda and Obi-Wan, who had once believed he was lost, welcomed him among the eternal. His presence beside them in the luminous afterlife was proof not of doctrine, but of transformation. Redemption, the initiate now understood, was not a reward. It was a choice, a single moment of truth where one turns toward the light, no matter how deep the shadow. And so Anakin Skywalker, the chosen one, did not ascend with thunder or fire. He ascended through stillness, through peace, through the tender touch of a father saving his son, and the quiet sigh of a soul finally free. The initiate let the silence hold them for a time, feeling the warm current of Anakin's legacy ripple through the Force. In every struggle between light and darkness, in every heart wrestling with despair, his story lived on. A reminder that greatness was not born from perfection, but from rising after the fall. And in that soft knowing, the initiate rose once more, guided by the spirits who had walked before. Yoda's clarity, Obi-Wan's sacrifice, and Anakin's redemption. Each a piece of the whole, each a note in the eternal melody of the Force. Ahead lay deeper waters, for beyond the personal, beyond the self, there stirred a power ancient and infinite, a truth whispered not in words, but in balance. And in the soft pulse of the Force, the initiate now felt it calling. It was time to enter the realm where beginnings and endings blurred, where the Force spoke not in visions, but in harmony. In the quiet twilight of a crumbling galaxy, a single spark began to glow, a spark that carried the promise of renewal amid the darkness. Luke Skywalker, known as the Last Spark, emerged not as a flawless hero, but as a being defined by his imperfections. His journey was one of revival, not only for the Jedi Order, but for the hope that lingered in every corner of the Force. Luke's path was fraught with hardship and loss, yet it was also illuminated by the soft light of redemption. In the years following the Great Wars, when the ancient ways had nearly faded into myth, he took up the mantle of reviving the Jedi. But his mission was more than a call to arms. It was a call to reconnect with the living Force itself. In his heart, he understood that immortality was not a state to be forced or claimed. It was a gentle merging with the cosmic flow, an eternal dance of light and shadow. It was in the mystical realm of the world between worlds that Luke discovered the true meaning of interconnectedness. This realm, a vast, timeless tapestry of converging destinies, revealed that every life was a thread in the endless fabric of the Force. Here, past and future intertwined seamlessly, and the boundaries between what was and what could be dissolved into a soft, enduring glow. In that place, Luke's imperfections were not burdens. They were the very marks of his humanity, the scars that reminded him he was capable of hope and change. Standing before swirling portals that shimmered with the hues of distant nebulae, Luke experienced a vision that encapsulated his purpose. He saw himself older, a figure of quiet strength, guiding a new generation of Jedi with gentle wisdom rather than rigid certainty. This vision was not a promise of unblemished triumph, but a testament to the resilience of a spirit that learns from every failure and every fall. It affirmed that true immortality lay not in living forever as a legend, but in leaving behind a legacy of hope, an enduring light that could guide others through even the darkest nights. On the scarred battleground of Crate, where rebellion once defied tyranny, Luke made his final stand, a sacrifice not of bitter defiance, but of profound love. There, amid shattered walls and fading dreams, he did not seek to secure victory through brute force. Instead, he offered himself as a beacon, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming despair, one spark of light could ignite the hearts of many. His sacrifice was an act of gentle surrender, a moment when the burden of mortal limitations was released, and the eternal nature of the Force shone through. His words, spoken softly in that final act, "If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful," became a paradox of hope, where death was not an end but a transformation into something greater. Luke's legacy, therefore, was not measured in triumphs or conquests, but in the quiet power of imperfection. He understood that the journey of the Jedi was not about perfection, but about the courage to embrace every failure and every triumph as part of the living, breathing tapestry of the Force. His final stand on Crate was less a battle for glory than a testament to the idea that immortality is a state of being, an ever-renewing hope that lives on in every whispered word, every gentle act of kindness, and every quiet moment of reflection. In the soft embrace of that eternal night, Luke Skywalker's spirit became a lasting spark, a reminder that even in a galaxy rife with darkness, the light of hope endures. His story is not one of legacy in the traditional sense, but a living message to all who seek to find balance, that immortality is found in the heart's quiet courage and in the continuous, gentle flow of the Force. The quiet spark of hope left by Luke Skywalker continued to glow softly in the hearts of those who sought the balance of the Force. Yet as light is ever accompanied by shadow, so too do the lessons of the past warn of the dangers of holding too tightly to what has been. In the serene corridors of the temple and the whispered memories of ancient lore, there emerged a cautionary refrain. True serenity is achieved not by clinging to legacy, but by embracing change and releasing the weight of what once was. In the dim recesses of the temple's ancient library, where the wisdom of centuries lies preserved in fragile scrolls and faded hollow records, there is a quiet tale of Jocasta Nu, a keeper of knowledge whose heart grew heavy with desperation. Once a dedicated chronicler of the Jedi Order, she found herself haunted by the relentless pursuit of preserving every detail of the past. Her fervor, born of love for the tradition, gradually became a chain that bound her to memories and rules long outdated. In her eyes, every lost moment of the Order was a wound that needed healing, every failure a stain that must be erased. And in this desperate grasping, Jocasta Nu lost the gentle art of letting go. Her solitude, marked by anxious scribblings and endless nights of record-keeping, grew into a burden that isolated her from the ever-changing tapestry of the Force. Similarly, Master Fei, whose name has echoed through the hallowed halls as a figure of ageless wisdom, became a living monument to the dangers of clinging to legacy. While many celebrated his years of service and his deep connection to the ancient ways, Fei's spirit slowly hardened. He isolated himself, retreating from the living present into a world of memories. In his self-imposed exile, he guarded tradition so fervently that he could no longer see the beauty of the Force's natural evolution. His once warm smile faded into an expression of quiet sorrow, a testament to a life spent holding on to what had been, rather than welcoming the new light that arose each day. For these Jedi, serenity was not the gentle embrace of the Force, but a fortress built from the detritus of the past. Their stories remind us that the true path to immortality lies in the fluidity of the Force, a perpetual cycle of creation, dissolution, and renewal. It is the art of surrendering, of allowing life to flow without the burden of yesterday's weight. The price of serenity, then, is not measured solely by loss, but by the failure to adapt, to let the light evolve. In the quiet moments between meditation and the rising of the twin suns, the initiate reflected on these cautionary tales. They recalled the luminous legacy of those who had embraced change, the ghosts of Jedi who, in death, became guiding lights, dissolving into the living current of the Force. Each of these spirits carried the promise that detachment was not abandonment, but a necessary release that allowed the eternal to breathe and evolve. In contrast, those who clung too tightly to their legacy risked becoming relics themselves, trapped in a past that no longer served the living. The initiate's heart, still echoing with the hope of the last spark, recognized that to be truly one with the Force, one must learn to let go. This is the essence of serenity, a quiet, gentle acceptance that life is ever-changing, that every ending births a new beginning. In the soft glow of early morning, as light filtered through ancient stained glass and the murmurs of the past mingled with the promise of tomorrow, the initiate vowed to honor both memory and change. They understood that the legacy of the Jedi was not a static inheritance, but a living dialogue between what was and what could be. As the day advanced, the initiate walked slowly through the temple gardens, where the breeze carried hints of both ancient incense and the fresh scent of rebirth. Each step was a meditation, a deliberate choice to release what was no longer needed and to welcome the flux of the Force. In the quiet, reflective cadence of nature, the initiate found solace and learned that true serenity comes from the heart's willingness to evolve. The legacy of Jocasta Nu and Master Fei, though marked by sorrow, became a gentle reminder that the true cost of immortality lies not in defying death, but in the inability to let go. To be immortal, one must live in harmony with the ever-shifting flow of the Force, a balance that is both delicate and dynamic. And so, with the wisdom of the past etched into their spirit and the promise of change softly whispering in their soul, the initiate stepped forward. In that quiet determination, they embraced the eternal dance of the Force, light and shadow, memory and renewal, knowing that the price of serenity was a lesson to be learned and ultimately the key to becoming truly one with the cosmos. In the still afterglow of lessons learned from those who clung to legacy, the initiate's heart turned toward a deeper, more ancient warning, one etched not in parchment, but in the very stone of the cosmos. Beyond the familiar halls of the temple and its quiet gardens, there lay a realm steeped in myth and memory, Mortis. Here the Force revealed its primordial face, and with it, the warnings of imbalance echoing through time. Mortis was a world apart, a place where the boundaries between light and dark blurred into a single, eternal twilight. In this mystic domain, three eternal figures reigned, not as deities in the conventional sense, but as avatars of the Force's ceaseless rhythm, the Father, the Son, and the Daughter. They were the living embodiment of balance, each representing a facet of the eternal cycle. The Father, ancient and resolute, had long been the pillar of order, holding the cosmos together with his unyielding strength. Yet even he was not immune to the corrosive touch of time and imbalance. The once venerable Father fell, his firm grasp on equilibrium weakening as the weight of countless conflicts began to wear on his spirit. In his decline, the cracks of imperfection spread like fractures in stone, and the Father's solemn watch gave way to vulnerability. Opposite him, the Son embodied raw passion, a force of creation and destruction, a chaotic flame that burned too fiercely. His corruption was not sudden, but a slow, insidious decay born from the very imbalance he was meant to channel. The sun's turbulent energy, once a vital part of the cosmic dance, twisted into a force that threatened to unravel the delicate fabric of the Force itself. His fall from grace, marked by the corruption of his essence, served as a dire reminder that unchecked passion could lead to ruin. In contrast to these tragic figures stood the daughter, a luminous being of compassion and sacrifice. It was she who, in the face of overwhelming darkness, chose to give of herself to preserve the sanctity of balance. Her sacrifice was not one of defeat, but of profound wisdom, a quiet relinquishing of self in order to restore harmony. For the Jedi, her example became an ideal, the ultimate act of letting go, of allowing the Force to flow unburdened by ego or desire. Yet even as the daughter's sacrifice shone as a beacon of hope, the scars of imbalance carved deep into Mortis revealed a darker truth. In the chaos left behind by the father's fall and the son's corruption, something unspeakable was born. From the fissures of disorder emerged Abeloth, a being of primordial chaos, a mirror to the Sith's darkest dreams. Abeloth was not created by design, but by the failure to maintain balance. Her existence was a stark warning. When the guardians of harmony falter, the void gives birth to chaos. The initiate listened to the silent, stone-carved lessons of Mortis with a heavy heart. Each line of ancient inscription, every whispered tale of the Mortis gods, was a testament to what can be lost when balance is forsaken. The daughter's selfless act was celebrated as the highest ideal of the Jedi, a gentle reminder that true immortality lay in surrendering to the Force. But the fall of the father and the corruption of the son were somber warnings, signs that even the most sacred order could be undone by pride and unchecked passion. As the initiate wandered the hallowed halls of Mortis, the weight of these truths pressed upon them like the ancient stone itself. The landscape was filled with crumbling statues and weathered reliefs that depicted the tragic decline of the Guardians. In the muted glow of a dying sun, the initiate could almost hear the father's steady heartbeat fading into silence, and the son's once fiery spirit dissolving into chaos. Yet the daughter's gentle visage persisted, a soft, enduring light that shone through the gloom. In that moment, the initiate understood that Mortis was not merely a place of myth, but a living chronicle of the Force's eternal cycle. It was a warning carved in stone. That imbalance, if left unchecked, could birth forces so dark and chaotic as to threaten the very essence of existence. And yet, in the sacrifice of the daughter, there remained a promise, a call to those who would walk the path of the Jedi, to embrace true serenity, to let go of the fear that binds them, and to trust in the ever-flowing current of life. Stepping away from the silent monuments of Mortis, the initiate carried this profound lesson in their heart. They knew that to honor the legacy of the Jedi, one must learn not only from light, but also from the shadows. The echoes of the fallen Guardians served as both warning and inspiration, a reminder that the true strength of the Force lies in its delicate, eternal balance. The Force is a vast and intricate web, stretching across the stars and weaving through time. Its patterns are intricate, its movements subtle, but at its core, the Force exists in balance, a delicate equilibrium between light and dark. Yet from time to time, the Force itself reveals its darker aspects, those forces born from fear, hunger, and imbalance. One such force was Abeloth, the manifestation of an ancient and tragic desire that had gone unchecked. A being who came to embody the very chaos the Jedi feared most. Abeloth was not always the monstrous entity that threatened the galaxy. She had once been a mortal woman, a simple soul in the tapestry of existence, but her insatiable hunger for power, control, and the immortality of the gods led her down a path of no return. It was her desire to replace the Mother, an entity who held dominion over life and death, that marked the beginning of her tragic transformation. The Mother had always been an unyielding figure in the grand balance of the Force, a being who shaped the natural world and controlled the cycles of life. But for Abeloth, the idea of living forever, of becoming as immortal as the father, son, and daughter of Mortis, became an obsession that she could not relinquish. Her desire for immortality grew from an innocent yearning to preserve life, to a destructive compulsion to transcend mortality itself. This hunger led her to the dark and dangerous rituals that allowed her to tap into the very essence of the Force. Rituals that ultimately altered her essence and set her on a path toward corruption. Abeloth's transformation was not merely physical, it was spiritual, a corruption of the Force's natural flow. She became something monstrous, an unnatural force that sought to undermine the delicate balance maintained by the Father and the other guardians of Mortis. The Jedi, with their deep understanding of the Force, feared the very essence of what Abeloth represented, the fear of loss. Her very existence was a reflection of everything the Jedi feared, an unrelenting desire to hold on to what should naturally pass. The Jedi's teachings, founded on the principles of attachment and detachment, were directly challenged by Abeloth's insatiable longing to possess what was never meant to be hers. She sought to replace the Mother, to claim a role in the Force that was never intended for mortal hands, and in doing so, she tore apart the fabric of existence. Her story serves as a reflection of the Jedi's own greatest fear, the fear of loss. The Jedi Order taught that attachment to things, to people, to concepts, especially attachment born from fear, would lead to the dark side of the Force. But in the very act of teaching this lesson, the Jedi often struggled to fully comprehend the depths of their own fear. To them, loss was something to be avoided at all costs. The fear of losing loved ones, the fear of losing power, or the fear of losing control over their destinies was the driving force behind much of their actions. Abeloth, in her infinite greed, was simply the embodiment of this fear taken to its extreme. Abeloth's origins were a tragic tale of hubris and desperation. She sought to replace the Mother not out of malice, but out of a mortal, almost childlike desire to grasp at what was beyond her reach. She wanted what she could never have: immortality, power, and the ability to control life itself. And in seeking these things, she tore apart the natural order, creating a being that could not be contained or controlled. Her hunger for more consumed her, and she became something beyond mortal understanding, a monstrous reflection of the fear that had driven her. But the Jedi failed to see the deeper truth behind Abeloth's creation. In their fear of losing control, they ignored the warning signs, blinded by their own attachment to the concept of balance and the fear of their own demise. They believed that by controlling the Force and ensuring that it remained in balance, they could stave off the chaos that Abeloth represented. But in doing so, they created a situation where their fear of loss and their unwillingness to let go only fueled the very chaos they sought to avoid. Abeloth was not merely a being to be defeated. She was a manifestation of their own deepest fears. Fears that had been left unchecked and unaddressed. In the end, Abeloth was a tragic figure. She was not simply a villain to be vanquished, but a cautionary tale for those who sought to control the natural flow of the Force. Her story is a warning to all who walk the path of the Jedi. The greater the attachment, the greater the fear, and the greater the potential for darkness to take root. Her very existence serves as a mirror to the Jedi's greatest flaw, their inability to truly let go. The Jedi believed that their duty was to preserve balance, but in trying to control that balance, they often fail to see that true peace comes not from possession, but from surrendering to the ebb and flow of life. As the tale of Abeloth unfolds, it becomes clear that her origin was not simply a tragic consequence of her desire for power. It was a manifestation of a deeper flaw, one that lies within all beings. Her story, and the lessons it carries, reminds us that fear, when left unchecked, can breed chaos. The Jedi's greatest challenge is not merely to maintain balance, but to recognize and confront their own fears. Fear of loss, fear of power, and fear of the unknown. Only through embracing the natural flow of the Force can true peace be achieved. The laughter of Abeloth, twisted and alien, echoed through the Force, a reminder of what happens when the natural order is corrupted by a desire to control life itself. But as her shrill cries faded into the emptiness, the air thickened with another, more insidious presence. It was a presence that spoke not of chaos, but of cold, deliberate hunger. The Jedi had learned their lessons from their connection with the Force, the balance of light and dark. But their understanding could not prepare them for the Sith, whose core philosophy was built on a different foundation. The Sith did not fear death. They sought to cheat it, to defy the natural limits of life itself. The Sith had a code, a doctrine as old as the darkness that whispered in the shadows of the galaxy, a doctrine that was rooted in ambition, control, and the ruthless pursuit of eternal power. Peace is a lie. The words of the Sith Code serve as the keystone to understanding their entire philosophy. Where the Jedi sought harmony and balance, the Sith sought domination and strength. They rejected the notion that peace was anything but a fleeting illusion. The Sith knew that only through power could true order be achieved. To them, peace was the mask behind which weakness hid, an idealized dream to which only the unknowing clung. The Sith thrived on the emotion that the Jedi rejected: anger, fear, hatred. These were the fuels of their power, the very energy that propelled them forward in their eternal quest to conquer not just the galaxy, but the very forces of life and death itself. This hunger for power manifested in the Rule of Two, a foundational concept within the Sith Order. The Rule of Two was deceptively simple. Two Sith, no more, no less. One would be the master, the other the apprentice. But beneath this surface, simplicity lay a deep and insidious strategy, one designed to perpetuate the Sith's insatiable desire for power. The Rule of Two was not simply a means of controlling the Sith, but a structure to ensure the continual rise of more powerful Sith Lords. Each Sith would be tested, challenged, and ultimately replaced. The apprentices' only goal was to overthrow the Master, taking their place as the new embodiment of Sith power. The cycle repeated, creating an endless loop of ambition, treachery, and unrelenting hunger. This insatiable quest for power was not about legacy in the traditional sense. Unlike the Jedi, who sought to leave behind a legacy of peace and wisdom, the Sith cared only for domination and control. They did not seek to be remembered. They sought to remain in power, to crush their enemies and force the galaxy into submission. The rule of two was the mechanism that ensured the Sith would never grow complacent. Every master, every apprentice, was driven by an unyielding need to surpass the other, to be the one who survived and thrived in a galaxy that had little mercy for those who faltered. The Sith were not just bound by their need for power, they were addicted to it, and that addiction came with a cost. In contrast to the Jedi's pursuit of serenity, the Sith's existence was a never-ending war against the natural order. For the Sith, life was a battlefield, and death was the ultimate failure. The idea of death as a finality was something the Jedi learned to accept as part of the natural flow of existence, but the Sith saw it as an obstacle to be overcome. To the Jedi, detachment from the material world was a spiritual necessity. To the Sith, attachment was the essence of their power. Their emotions were weapons, each one a tool to forge the strength necessary to cheat death and achieve their goals. The Jedi feared that attachment would lead them to the dark side, but for the Sith, attachment was a source of power, the energy that they used to fuel their ambition and their drive to transcend mortality. The Force to the Jedi was a river flowing naturally, guided by principles of balance, but to the Sith, it was a weaponized river, one they could bend and control to suit their needs. They saw the Force not as a tool of balance, but as a means of domination. The dark side was not an aspect of the Force that should be feared or avoided. It was something to be embraced, weaponized, and turned against all those who would dare to oppose the Sith. Sith immortality, however, came with an inescapable truth, the price of defying death. As they sought to transcend the natural flow of life and death, the Sith embraced unnatural rituals, dark sorcery, and forbidden knowledge in their quest for eternal life. But in their pursuit of immortality, they paid the price of their souls, each ritual a step further from their humanity, each act of defiance a chain that bound them to the dark side forever. Unlike the Jedi, who believed in the natural cycle of life, the Sith had no intention of letting death claim them. They were consumed by a hunger that could never be satisfied, driven by the belief that their power was the key to ultimate control over existence. Their quest to cheat death was not just a means of survival, it was their way of asserting their dominance over the universe. But with each attempt to extend their lives, the Sith grew more corrupted, more disconnected from the balance of the Force. They became not just beings of darkness, but creatures that existed outside of the natural flow, feeding on the very life they sought to control. The Sith Code, with its emphasis on power, legacy, and control, stood in stark contrast to the Jedi's path of serenity. For the Jedi, the pursuit of balance was paramount, an acceptance of the ebb and flow of life and death. But for the Sith, life was a struggle to conquer, a battle to claim the universe as their own. In this battle there could be no peace, only the endless hunger for more. The dark side, then, was not merely a temptation. It was a tool for domination, a weaponized force used by the Sith to claim what they believed was rightfully theirs. And in the end, it would be their undoing. The pursuit of immortality, the obsession with power, the hunger for dominance, these would be the very things that consumed them, leading them down a path from which there was no return. The thirst for immortality was not a new desire for the Sith. It was an obsession that spanned centuries, one that had shaped the darkest corners of their philosophy. Among the many figures who had sought to defy the natural cycle of life and death, none stood as tall, or as tragically, as Darth Andeddu. A Sith Lord of ancient times, Andeddu's quest for eternal life led him to unravel some of the darkest secrets of the Sith, secrets that would reverberate through history and come to haunt the galaxy in future generations. Andeddu's pursuit of immortality was detailed in the Phobos Manuscript, a dark tome that held the knowledge of essence transfer, an ancient and forbidden Sith technique that allowed a being's consciousness to be transferred from one body to another. The Sith had long believed that death was a mere obstacle in the pursuit of ultimate power, but Andeddu sought to transcend this limitation entirely. He believed that through the transfer of his essence, he could live indefinitely, forever controlling the galaxy through an unbroken line of power. The manuscript became the key to his ambition, a blueprint for cheating death itself. In Andeddu's mind, this was not just a way to preserve his power. He saw himself as a god-king, a ruler who would never die, whose reign would extend across the ages. His mastery of Sith alchemy, coupled with his dark understanding of the Force, allowed him to manipulate his essence, bending it to his will. Yet, the cost of this immortality was profound, for the Sith did not just cheat death, they corrupted themselves in the process. Darth Andeddu's fate was a tragic one, and it is a reminder of the madness that often accompanies the pursuit of forbidden power. His attempt to preserve his consciousness through essence transfer did not grant him eternal peace. Instead, it led to the unraveling of his mind. After his physical death, Andeddu's spirit continued to exist, but it was no longer the focused, powerful will of a Sith Lord. It was fragmented, frayed into madness by centuries of isolation and the strain of keeping his consciousness intact across the ages. He had sought to transcend death, to escape the boundaries of mortal life, but in doing so, he had lost the very essence that made him what he was, a person. The Phobos Manuscript became a dark artifact, a relic of Sith lore that held the promise of immortality, but at a terrible cost. The knowledge it contained was dangerous, seductive, and ultimately corrupting. It would become a key influence on later Sith Lords, including Emperor Palpatine, whose own attempts at immortality would echo Andeddu's tragic failure. Palpatine's experiments on Exegol, the creation of clones and the dark rituals he performed, were influenced by the knowledge Andeddu had left behind, a dangerous legacy that would come to define the Emperor's own twisted vision for eternal life. While Andeddu had sought immortality through essence transfer, Palpatine's methods were more ruthless, more technologically advanced. On Exegol, Palpatine sought to create a true army of Sith clones, using Sith alchemy and dark science to transfer his consciousness into new bodies, effectively creating an unbreakable chain of life that would allow him to rule forever. But like Andeddu, Palpatine found that immortality was not as easily achieved as he had hoped. His clones were imperfect, deteriorating over time, and the process of transferring his essence caused his spirit to become warped, just as Andeddu's had. The link between Andeddu and Palpatine's experiments highlights the dangerous consequences of seeking to control death. Both Sith Lords sought to escape the natural order, to transcend the limitations of mortality, yet both were doomed to failure. Andeddu's fate was to become a wandering spirit, locked in an eternal, maddening existence, no longer truly alive, but not truly dead either. His ambition had turned him into something other than human, something less than even the monsters he had once commanded. Andeddu's descent into madness was not just the result of the strain of essence transfer, but also the result of his own inability to understand the true cost of immortality. The Sith Code demanded that the powerful should rule and never be limited by the natural flow of life and death. But in seeking to be free from these limitations, Andeddu and those who followed in his footsteps failed to recognize that death was not just an end, it was part of the balance. By trying to defy it, they only distorted their own essence and condemned themselves to eternal suffering. The tome ultimately serves as a warning. The quest for immortality comes at a cost that cannot be paid without consequences. Andeddu may have been the first to attempt such a dangerous and forbidden path, but he was far from the last. His legacy lived on in the twisted experiments of the Sith who came after him, most notably Palpatine, whose own obsession with immortality would shape the galaxy's darkest moments. As Andeddu's spirit faded into madness, the galaxy continued its cycle of rise and fall. The Sith, ever hungry for more power, would continue to seek the answers to death's mysteries, but the truth remained clear. Death cannot be conquered without corrupting the very essence of life. Those who would seek to cheat death would find, like Andeddu, that immortality comes at the price of everything they were. Darth Plagueis, the Muun Sith Lord, was a figure of immense ambition whose obsession with immortality shaped his legacy in ways that would ripple across the galaxy for generations. His life was defined by his relentless pursuit of one goal: to cheat death and secure eternal life, not just for himself, but for the Sith as a whole. In this, he sought to surpass even the most infamous Sith Lords of the past, believing that his understanding of the Force, specifically his experiments with midi-chlorians, would allow him to control life itself. Unlike previous Sith, who had resorted to essence transfer or cloning to extend their lives, Plagueis turned his attention to the biological and microscopic aspects of existence. He focused on midi-chlorians, the microscopic life forms that dwelled within every living being, acting as conduits between the Force and the physical world. Plagueis believed that by manipulating these midi-chlorians, he could create life, prevent death, and ultimately grant himself immortality. He poured years of research into his studies, confident that the secret to overcoming the natural limits of mortality was within his grasp. His research, combined with his mastery of the dark side, enabled him to heal wounds and extend his own life for a time, but his obsession never wavered. He sought not just to prolong life, but to control it completely. It was through this obsession that Plagueis came to believe that the Force itself was not a natural cosmic balance, but something that could be manipulated and bent to his will. He theorized that if he could control the midi-chlorians at the molecular level, he could influence birth itself, creating life as he saw fit. This idea became his ultimate ambition: to create a perfect vessel for his essence, someone who would inherit his power and extend his reign beyond his natural lifespan. His most controversial experiment was the creation of Anakin Skywalker. Plagueis' interference in the Force was so profound that it resulted in Anakin's conception, an act that led to the so-called virgin birth. The child's birth was not the result of natural biological processes, but rather a manipulation of the Force at its deepest level. In this way, Plagueis believed he had succeeded in creating life itself. Anakin Skywalker was not simply the chosen one foretold by prophecy, but a product of Sith alchemy, an instrument of Plagueis' design. However, while Plagueis reveled in his experiments, he never saw the full extent of their consequences. The very creation of Anakin Skywalker, his immaculate birth, marked the beginning of a series of events that would ultimately lead to the downfall of his carefully laid plans. Plagueis was blind to the ramifications of his own ambition and arrogance. He believed that he was the master of his fate, that he was invincible and beyond the reach of death. But as with all Sith, his hubris would be his undoing. It was his apprentice, Darth Sidious, who ultimately betrayed him. Sidious, a Sith Lord of even greater ambition, had patiently waited for the moment to strike. Plagueis, in his blind arrogance, had never considered that his power might be vulnerable to his own pupil. In a final moment of betrayal, Sidious killed Plagueis in his sleep, sealing his fate, and ensuring that Plagueis' quest for immortality would remain an unattainable delusion. Plagueis had placed all his hopes in his research, in his ability to control life and death. But in the end, he failed to understand the true nature of the Sith: domination and manipulation of others. Sidious's betrayal also highlighted a key aspect of Sith philosophy. Immortality was a fool's gamble. Despite all of Plagueis' research and his near-perfect control over life, he could not foresee the treachery of his apprentice. Plagueis' death was a harsh reminder that the Sith's quest for immortality was ultimately hollow, for the Sith were never truly in control. Their constant internal power struggles and betrayals were the very forces that ensured they would never escape death. Immortality for them was a fleeting illusion, a fleeting dream that could never be realized. The Muun's delusion was, in essence, a cautionary tale for all who sought to cheat death. Plagueis, like many Sith before him, believed that he could master the Force to the point of transcending mortality. Yet his obsession blinded him to the simple truth: life and death are part of the same cycle, and any attempt to break that cycle ultimately leads to destruction. The Sith, in their pursuit of power, were doomed to destroy themselves. Despite the tragedy of Plagueis' demise, his legacy lived on. The events he set into motion, particularly the creation of Anakin Skywalker, would have far-reaching consequences for the galaxy, leading to the rise of the Empire and the fall of the Jedi Order. The lessons of Plagueis' life and death served as a reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition and the fatal consequences of trying to control forces beyond one's comprehension. In the end, Plagueis was a man who thought he could conquer death, but in doing so, he became its victim. His quest for immortality was not only a failure, but a warning to all who would follow in his footsteps, that there is no true victory in defying the natural order of life and death. The Sith may have pursued power, but it was the Jedi who understood the balance that Plagueis, in his hubris, could never comprehend. Vitiate, also known as Emperor Valkorion, was a Sith Lord whose hunger for immortality and power transcended anything the galaxy had seen before. His quest was not merely to extend his life, but to consume the very essence of the Force itself. Unlike the Sith Lords before him, who sought to dominate the galaxy through conventional means of control, Vitiate sought to devour the Force as a whole. His existence was a cancer to the galaxy, a malignant presence that threatened to unravel the very fabric of reality. Vitiate's origins were as mysterious as his eventual ascent to power. Born on the world of Nathema, a barren, desolate planet in the galaxy's unknown regions, Vitiate's path to darkness began early. Nathema had once been a thriving world, but under the influence of the Sith, it was reduced to a husk. The planet's destruction was an act of unimaginable cruelty. Vitiate, as a young Sith, unleashed his dark power in a ritual that drained every living being on the planet of their life force, a catastrophic act that caused Nathema to be forever abandoned and devoid of life. The event was a pivotal moment in his life, an act that left an indelible mark on his soul and the Force itself. The echoes of his cruelty reverberated across the galaxy, signaling the beginning of his transformation into a being who existed beyond mortal constraints. From that moment on, Vitiate's hunger for life and for power grew insatiable. He became consumed by the idea of eternal life, not simply through conventional Sith alchemy or dark rituals, but through the total consumption of all life. His goal was not just to extend his own life, but to consume the Force itself, to become the embodiment of all that was dark, all that was corrupted. This insatiable need for immortality would drive him to become one of the most dangerous figures in Sith history. Vitiate's power grew exponentially over the years as he sought to manipulate the very fabric of the Force. He mastered techniques that allowed him to drain the life force from entire populations, a grotesque power that turned him into a living paradox, a being of death who was somehow able to continue existing. His most notable achievement was the creation of the Eternal Fleet, a vast armada of warships capable of wiping out entire civilizations. The fleet served not just as a tool for conquest, but as a manifestation of Vitiate's endless hunger. Every vessel was a symbol of his desire to consume the galaxy, to bring it to heel under his unyielding will. Through the Eternal Fleet and his immense dark power, Vitiate began his quest to dominate the galaxy. His reign was marked by a vast and unrelenting expansion as he conquered countless worlds, draining their life forces and leaving them barren. However, it was not just worlds that he sought to subjugate, but the very essence of the Force itself. Vitiate's hunger for power became so consuming that it warped his body and soul. He was no longer truly human, no longer truly alive. His existence became a sickening echo in the Force, a distortion that made him a walking manifestation of corruption. As his power grew, so too did his desperation to overcome death itself. He sought to become more than a Sith Lord, more than a man. He sought to become the Force's master. In his mind, immortality was not simply a matter of surviving death, but of becoming death itself. His obsession with this ideal drove him to unspeakable acts. He sought to imprison the essence of his victims, using their life forces to fuel his power and extend his own existence. His need for control became all-consuming, and he would stop at nothing to achieve his ultimate goal. However, as with all Sith who sought immortality, Vitiate's pursuit would eventually be his undoing. The more he consumed, the more disconnected he became from the Force. His essence began to dissolve into the void, a result of his insatiable hunger. What Vitiate failed to understand was that immortality, like all things in the galaxy, was a fragile construct. His endless consumption had caused a rift in the natural order of the Force, and in time, it began to unravel him from within. He became a dark, decaying force, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition. Vitiate's essence dissolved into the very void he had tried to command, a cancer in the Force that left only a fleeting memory of his existence. His hunger, his lust for immortality, and his endless quest for control had destroyed him, leaving only an echo of his once mighty presence. He had sought to become one with the Force, to bend it to his will, but instead, he was consumed by it. His fall was a tragic reminder of the futility of the Sith's search for immortality. Vitiate's legacy, however, did not die with him. His essence, corrupted as it was, continued to linger in the dark corners of the galaxy, a silent reminder of the price of defying the natural order. The ripple effects of his reign could still be felt in the shattered remnants of the galaxy, a testament to the danger of trying to cheat death. In the end, Vitiate's life and his death served as a grim warning to all who sought to dominate the galaxy and to control the flow of life and death itself. He was a figure whose very existence was a challenge to the natural order, and in the end, that challenge consumed him. The Galaxy Devourer had become consumed in turn, his insatiable hunger bringing about his own undoing. Exar Kun was a figure of unimaginable power, a Sith Lord whose ambition was as vast as the galaxy itself. His journey to the dark side was marked by arrogance and an insatiable thirst for domination. Unlike other Sith Lords who followed more traditional paths to power, Kun sought to redefine the very nature of Sith existence. He was not content with simply ruling. He aimed to be a god, to become an immortal force that transcended death itself. His legacy, however, would be forever entwined with the temples of Yavin IV, where his spirit would remain bound for millennia, a cautionary tale of the dangers of unchecked hubris. Exar Kun's story began long before his fall to the dark side. As a Jedi Knight, he was a promising student, driven by a thirst for knowledge and power. He studied the ancient teachings of the Jedi, but his hunger for greater understanding led him down a darker path. In his search for power, Kun discovered the Sith, a revelation that would change the course of his destiny. The Sith offered him something the Jedi could not: the freedom to explore the full extent of his power, unshackled by the Jedi Code. Kun's desire for strength and control was so overwhelming that he abandoned the Jedi Order, choosing instead to embrace the dark side. Kun's path to Sith power was marked by his discovery of ancient Sith artifacts and teachings, which he used to enhance his abilities. His exploration of these dark secrets led him to the legendary Sith Lords who had come before him, including the spirit of Freedon Nad. Under Nad's tutelage, Kun's powers grew exponentially, and he soon set his sights on galactic conquest. Kun's ambition was limitless, and he sought to bring the galaxy under his control, becoming the supreme ruler of all. However, Kun's descent into darkness was not without its consequences. His actions caused a ripple effect throughout the galaxy, as his Sith teachings spread like wildfire. He corrupted not only the Jedi Order, but also the very foundation of the Force. In a bold attempt to solidify his power, Kun turned against his former mentors, including his fellow Jedi. He led a rebellion that brought destruction to the Jedi, with countless Jedi falling in battle to his newfound strength. His actions led to the decimation of the Jedi Temple on Ossus and the near destruction of the Jedi Order. Kun's final attempt to solidify his power, however, would be his undoing. He set his sights on the ancient Sith homeworld of Yavin IV, a place steeped in dark energy and untold power. It was there that Kun sought to bind his spirit to the temples, to live forever as a god. He used the power of the ancient Sith artifacts to trap his essence within the temples, hoping to create a legacy that would last for eternity. However, this act of hubris proved to be his downfall. By binding himself to the temples, Kun effectively imprisoned his own soul, unable to escape the traps of his own making. Kun's defeat came not at the hands of a great warrior, but from his own arrogance. As his power grew, so did his belief that he was invincible, untouchable. He believed that his mastery of the dark side made him beyond the reach of mortality. Yet his overconfidence left him blind to the consequences of his actions. When Kun's former pupil, the Jedi Knight Ulic Qel-Droma, turned against him, Kun's world began to crumble. Ulic's betrayal shattered the fragile hold Kun had on his own power. His once mighty Sith Empire fell, and Kun was left trapped within the temples of Yavin IV, his soul forever bound to the place of his greatest ambition. Even in death, Kun's presence was not easily forgotten. His spirit lingered on Yavin IV, where he continued to corrupt those who dared to enter his domain. His influence was felt for centuries, as his ghost haunted the ruins of the ancient temples. His power over the living was not fully gone, and it was said that Kun's essence was capable of manipulating the minds of the living, using their ambitions against them. His spirit would corrupt future generations, including the students of Luke Skywalker, further demonstrating the dangers of seeking immortality through the dark side. Exar Kun's legacy was one of tragic hubris. He sought to transcend death, to become more than just a man, but in doing so, he locked himself in a prison of his own making. His desire for immortality, his quest to become a god, led him to betray everything he had once stood for. His fall was not just a fall from grace, but a warning. The pursuit of eternal life through the dark side is a path that can only end in destruction. Kun's story was a grim reminder that the darker the ambition, the steeper the fall. Yet, despite his fall, Exar Kun's spirit would live on, a shadow that haunted the galaxy long after his physical death. His legacy served as a cautionary tale for future generations of Jedi and Sith alike, a reminder that even the most powerful beings can fall to their own desires. For Kun, immortality was not the key to true power. Instead, it was his very obsession with it that led to his downfall. In the wake of Exar Kun's tragic fall, the dark side continued to weave its insidious tapestry across the galaxy. The lingering shadow of hubris and corruption gave rise to new legends, none more enigmatic than Darth Momin. Known as the Sculptor of Chaos, Momin sought immortality, not through sheer force or subjugation, but through transformation, a metamorphosis enacted behind a mask that concealed as much as it revealed. His path was as much an art as it was a dark ritual. His visage, a living canvas upon which the tragedy of defying death was painted in endless shifting hues. In the hidden recesses of a fortress that recalled the imposing might of Vader's own citadel, Momin established his dominion. Here, within cold, shadowed corridors and beneath vaulted ceilings that echoed with forgotten sorrows, the dark side found its portal to everlasting night. The fortress itself became a monument to his ambition, a labyrinth of stone and steel, where the whispers of ancient Sith rituals mingled with the ceaseless hum of the dark force. This was a place where art and destruction converged, where every brushstroke of chaos was carefully measured against the relentless march of time. Darth Momin believed that immortality could be achieved by transcending the physical form, a state attainable through a mask that became his second skin, his shield against the ravages of decay. His mask was not merely an object of concealment, but a masterpiece of Sith alchemy, adorned with runes and sigils that pulsed with malevolent energy. It was a silent declaration. "You cannot kill me. I am idea." In those few words, Momin encapsulated his defiant belief that true power lies in concept and conviction, rather than in the frailty of flesh. The fortress served as both sanctuary and crucible. Within its depths, Momin honed his dark craft, blending Sith sorcery with the raw creativity of chaos. His experiments were as much a form of art as they were a means of achieving eternal life. The dark energy he summoned coalesced into eerie sculptures and macabre murals that adorned the walls. Each piece a testament to his vision of chaos made tangible. These works of dark art did not simply celebrate the power of the Sith. They condemned the ephemeral nature of mortal life, offering instead a glimpse of a legacy that defied the finality of death. But the path Momin trod was fraught with peril. The mask, while imbuing him with a semblance of immortality, came at a steep price. In his relentless pursuit to outlast the natural cycle, Momin began to lose touch with his very essence. His mind, once sharp and creative, became a labyrinth of conflicting impulses, each one a spark of chaotic energy fighting for dominance. In the silent hours of meditation, when even the fortress seemed to hold its breath, Muun would confront the duality within, the fleeting nature of human frailty and the relentless drive toward a monstrous perfection. He saw in his reflection not the visage of a living being, but the grim outline of an idea, an immortal ideal that had grown too vast to be contained. Outside the fortress, the dark side stirred with unrest. Rumors spread through the Sith ranks of Muun's unorthodox methods, whispers of a power that was as unstable as it was potent. Yet for those who followed him, his masked visage became a symbol of defiance against the natural order, a promise that the dark side, if sculpted with relentless will, could indeed bend even death to its design. In the halls of his fortress, amid the interplay of shadow and faint, unyielding light, Darth Muun's legacy began to take shape. His mask, with its cryptic inscriptions, became the emblem of his doctrine. That immortality is not the mere extension of life, but the transcendence of mortal limits, a transformation into an enduring idea that outlives its creator. Yet even as his followers celebrated this promise, the cost was ever present. A reminder that the pursuit of eternal life through chaos is a double-edged sword. As the night deepened and the fortress's corridors echoed with the low hum of the dark force, Muun's figure stood resolute before a vast, starless window. His eyes, hidden behind the mask, seemed to gaze into an infinite void, a reflection of the chaos he sought to command. In that silent moment, the sculptor of chaos understood that his journey, like all things touched by the dark side, was marked by both creation and decay. In the dark corridors of Sith legend, there exists a figure whose very name is spoken in hushed tones, a being who clings to life through the raw, unyielding force of hatred. Darth Sion, known as the Lord of Pain, embodies the agony of immortality without purpose. His existence is a testament to the destructive power of rage, a twisted path where hatred becomes the means to defy death, even as it consumes the soul. In his early descent to the dark side, Sion harbored ambitions of greatness, seeking to master the Force with fierce determination. But as his journey deepened, that determination transformed into an obsession to hold on to life by any means necessary. In his relentless pursuit, Sion became an instrument of suffering, a being sustained not by hope or purpose, but by an endless corrosive fire of hatred. Within the shadowed depths of his tormented existence, Sion's body was ravaged, held together by sheer force of will. Each breath was a struggle, each heartbeat a reminder of the agony fueling his dark life. His visage, scarred and contorted, reflected the torment of a spirit that refused to yield. For Sion, every pang of pain was both a curse and a twisted source of power, a fuel that allowed him to cling desperately to a cursed form of life. Yet amid his ceaseless suffering, a challenge arose that would force him to confront the emptiness of his hatred. It came in the form of a question, softly uttered by Mitra Surik, a beacon of the light that the Sith so often spurn. What do you have left to hate? Her words cut deeper than any blade, resonating in the dark recesses of Sion's tortured soul. They challenged the very foundation of his existence, demanding introspection in a life long defined by unbridled anger. For the first time in many years, Sion paused amid his inner maelstrom. The question echoed through him, a refrain that no amount of violence or anguish could silence. In that moment, he saw that his relentless hatred had become an empty echo, a cacophony of pain offering no true purpose but an endless cycle of torment. His immortality, maintained by the dark side's cruelty, had robbed him of the essence that makes life meaningful. Instead of a legacy of power, he had forged a prison of agony. The dark side, in its seductive might, had promised dominion over death, yet it delivered only a hollow existence, a state where the absence of hope was replaced by the constant, unyielding pressure of misery. Sion's body, his mind, his very soul were shackled by ceaseless torment. His life had become a stagnant spiral of suffering, feeding on itself, until nothing remained but pain. In the cold, unfeeling depths of ancient Sith temples, where dark rituals once celebrated the conquest of death, Darth Sion now stood as a grim reminder of the true cost of defying nature. His existence was a silent dirge for all who sought immortality through hatred. For him, the dark side had turned its weapons inward, and his pain was both his strength and his curse. As the stone corridors echoed with the whisper of long-forgotten incantations, a bitter truth emerged. Immortality achieved through relentless hatred is no victory. It is an endless descent into agony. Sion's fate was sealed by his own torment, his refusal to let go, leaving him a hollow, unfulfilled shadow. Yet even in the depths of despair, the question from Mitra Surik lingered, a challenge to all who trod the dark path. If hatred becomes your only sustenance, then what remains of your soul? In the quiet moments between relentless suffering and the cold embrace of the dark side, Darth Sion's legacy served as a dire warning. The true price of immortality is the loss of all that makes life worth living. In the dark aftermath of unending strife, the remnants of Sith ambition gathered like shadows in the void. The whispers of ancient hatred and unyielding power coalesced in one figure, Palpatine. Once a master of subtle manipulation and ruthless ambition, he had transcended mortal limitations through cloning, forbidden dyads, and the unwavering devotion of the Sith Eternal. Now, his reign had mutated into something grotesque, a macabre spectacle where decay and corruption reigned supreme. In the hidden recesses of Exegol, beneath a sky forever choked with storm and ash, Palpatine's fortress stood as a monument to his eternal defiance of death. The dark side, as he had harnessed it, churned relentlessly, a river of corrupted energy that flowed through the veins of his domain. Here, the art of cloning was twisted into a perverse form of immortality, each new body an echo of his insatiable hunger for control. Dyads formed in secret, binding his essence to countless vessels in a futile attempt to cheat the natural order. His once formidable presence had become a rotting spectre, an emperor in name, whose power was sustained by the unyielding stench of decay. Within the labyrinthine halls of his dark citadel, the air was thick with the reek of rotting strand casts, failed experiments and decaying bodies that testified to his hubris. Every corridor, every chamber, pulsed with the grim reminder that immortality achieved through such unholy means came at a terrible price. The very walls seemed to mourn with a low, guttural sigh, as if the Force itself lamented the perversion of its natural flow. Yet Palpatine's tyranny was not only maintained by the physical decay that surrounded him, it was also enforced by the cold, calculating philosophy of the Sith Eternal. His followers, draped in robes of midnight and armed with dark resolve, believed that power was the only true destiny. They embraced the Sith Code with fanatical fervor, and their loyalty was as unyielding as the decay that festered in their master's domain. In their eyes, the Emperor was not a corpse, but the embodiment of the dark side's ultimate promise, an eternal ruler who would cast the galaxy into shadow. In his final hours, as his body withered beneath the weight of endless dark rituals, Palpatine unleashed his defiant cry, "I am all the Sith," a proclamation meant to echo across time and space. This exaltation of dark ambition was met with a resounding counter from the forces of light. In a climactic confrontation that would forever alter the destiny of the galaxy, Rey, a beacon of hope for the new generation of Jedi, answered with a single resolute declaration, "And I am all the Jedi." Their words clashed like the notes of a cosmic symphony, each representing the eternal struggle between creation and destruction, light and dark. The stench of decay, the palpable aura of corruption, and the echo of clashing destinies filled the air as the battle unfolded. In that moment, the galaxy bore witness to the ultimate irony. An emperor who had sought to dominate life and defy death, reduced to a fading echo of his former self. His elaborate schemes, his monstrous experiments, all were undone by the inexorable force of destiny, where the balance of the cosmos demanded a reckoning. Even as Palpatine's rotting essence began to dissolve into the void, a slow disintegration of all he had built, the dark side clung to him like a malignant shroud. The Sith Eternal, though battered by betrayal and decay, still whispered his name in hushed tones, a lament for a legacy that had become a cautionary tale. His final defiance, once meant to herald eternal supremacy, now served as a stark reminder that to cheat death is to invite an endless spiral of corruption. In the silence following the storm of battle, the words of the light resonated. "I am all the Jedi." They were not a proclamation of victory, but a promise that the struggle for balance, for true immortality, would continue. The dark forces had been exposed, and even in decay, the lesson was clear. No matter how far one might sink into corruption, the eternal light of hope remains unextinguished. In the furthest reaches of the galaxy, where the light of distant suns falters and darkness reigns unchallenged, there exists a dread expanse known as the Maw. This is a place where the very fabric of the Force is warped by time and shadow, a boundary forged by ancient Sith rituals designed to contain a power too dangerous to be left free. Abeloth. Yet, as the centuries passed, those dark rites began to erode, weakening the barrier that held her at bay. Both Jedi and Sith had long feared Abeloth, whose origin was rooted in a mortal's desperate hunger to replace the Eternal Mother, a force of chaos that defied the natural cycle of life and death. To the Sith, Abeloth was an anomaly, a malignant echo of their own ambitions. In a bid to control her, they had woven intricate rituals deep within the Maw's crushing gravity, a metaphysical prison meant to harness her dark essence. But the very rituals intended to confine her instead acted as corrosive agents, slowly dissolving the boundary until the dark side's crescendo could no longer be held at bay. Within the Maw, a swirling cluster of void and blackness, ancient incantations mingled with the low, relentless pulse of the Force. There, in the oppressive silence, Abeloth's presence began to seep through the cracks of the failing barrier. It was not an eruption of violence, but a slow, insidious resurgence, a malignant shadow unfurling across a shattered prison of cosmic stone. Her return marked the peak of dark power, a warning of what arises when the natural order is defied. As the barrier weakened, a grim truth emerged. Both the Jedi and the Sith were bound by a shared folly, a paralyzing fear of mortality. The Jedi embraced the natural cycle of life and death, seeking unity with the Force by letting go of their attachments. In contrast, the Sith, driven by insatiable ambition, sought to conquer death and seize power through unnatural means. Yet in their defiance of nature, both orders had sown the seeds of chaos. Their fear, whether of loss or of oblivion, had weakened the very boundaries that once held the dark chaos in check. The Initiate, whose journey had carried them from the serene halls of Jedi temples to the shadowed archives of Sith lore, now felt the weight of this shared error. The ancient rituals, performed in the forgotten depths of the Sith, had become a double-edged sword. On one side, they promised the defiance of death. On the other, they bred corruption and unleashed forces that even the Sith could not fully command. Abeloth's return was the dark side's ultimate crescendo, a manifestation of the peril in trying to cheat the natural order. In that moment, the Initiate understood that the prison of the Maw was not merely a physical boundary, but a symbol of a greater truth. It was a testament to the folly of clinging to power out of fear. The Jedi's gentle surrender and the Sith's ruthless ambition converged in this dark nexus, revealing that the price of immortality is paid in the currency of the soul. To deny the inevitability of death is to invite chaos, a truth both orders had long overlooked. As the malignant essence of Abeloth began to radiate outward, a chill swept through the darkened corridors of the Maw. The Initiate could almost hear the lament of the Force, a sorrowful dirge for what is lost when fear takes hold. In that silence, the lesson was clear. The cycle of life and death, with all its pain and beauty, must be embraced rather than defied. Both Jedi and Sith, in their separate pursuits, had allowed their terror of mortality to corrupt their purpose. With the barrier weakened and the dark crescendo of Abeloth growing ever stronger, the galaxy stood on the brink of a new era, one where the consequences of defying death would force both light and dark to reckon with their shared vulnerabilities. The Initiate, bearing the weight of these ancient lessons, wondered what future might emerge from this crucible of fear and ambition. In the quiet void of the Maw, as the dark energies pulsed and the remnants of Sith rituals crumbled into dust, the fate of the galaxy balanced precariously on the edge of chaos. The shared folly of both orders, their unyielding fear of mortality, had paved the way for Abeloth's resurgence. Now, with the dark side swelling in power, the galaxy was poised for a reckoning that would test the very limits of life and death. The galaxy, having endured the ceaseless ebb and flow of light and dark, was at peace once more, at least for a fleeting moment. This peace was not the absence of struggle, but the recognition that both the Jedi and the Sith had left their indelible marks upon the Force. Life, death, and everything in between had shaped the course of the galaxy, and from this tumultuous past arose a new understanding. The Jedi had come to recognize that their ideals, though noble, could not be preserved without consequence. They had embraced the idea that serenity did not lie in the absence of conflict, but in the acceptance of it. Even in the face of imperfection, they had learned that true strength arose not from rigid adherence to rules, but from growth. Growth that included both victory and defeat. Their legacy was no longer something to be frozen in time, it was something to be lived. They understood now that the path to wisdom required not only a connection to the light, but an awareness of the shadows as well. For the Sith, their pursuit of immortality through corruption, obsession, and the dark side had come at a tremendous cost. The galaxy had witnessed their lust for power, their attempt to cheat death, only to find that such immortality was fleeting and hollow. Their obsession had led them to twist the natural order of the Force, and in doing so, they had created chaos, not only within the galaxy, but within themselves. The Sith's greatest flaw had not been their desire for power, but their inability to let go, their refusal to accept the natural flow of life and death. The dark side had consumed them in their pursuit of eternal dominance, leaving behind only ruins and broken souls. But now, with the dust of their final battle settling, the galaxy was left with a sobering truth. Both Jedi and Sith were part of the same cosmic equation. Both had sought immortality, one through peace and one through domination. But both had failed to understand that true immortality was not in defying death, but in accepting the cycle of life. The Force, in its infinite wisdom, had answered their call, not with a grand resolution, but with an eternal reminder. Everything in life was temporary, and yet everything was connected. The Jedi and Sith, in their endless struggles, had both played their parts in the cosmic dance of life and death. The cycle continued, but it had shifted. The galaxy at last had the chance to heal, not because the wounds had vanished, but because the people who lived within it had learned that peace was not found in the absence of conflict, but in the balance of opposites. The galaxy stood at the crossroads, a new generation poised to learn from the mistakes of the past. The wounds of war would never fully heal, but the lessons of the Jedi and Sith remained, carried forward in the hearts of those who would choose differently. The stories of their rises and falls had become more than myths. They were now warnings, not of what was inevitable, but of what was avoidable. In the end, the galaxy had learned the greatest lesson of all. It was not power or immortality that defined a legacy, but choice. The choice to act with compassion, to embrace both light and dark, and to understand that true strength arose from the courage to let go of what could not be controlled. The Force had always known this, and now the galaxy, through its most tumultuous eras, had come to understand it as well. The choice was theirs, as it had always been. And so, as the stars continued to shine, the galaxy turned toward an uncertain future, forever shaped by the wisdom of its past and the potential for its future.